The 16-year-old who fought segregation. Separate but not equal. Barbara Johns, a black 16-year-old girl, grew up in Farmville, Virginia in 1951. During that time in America, a policy called segregation kept black people and white people separate. Black people were forced to sit at the back of buses while white people sat at the front. There were separate drinking fountains, and some restaurants would not even allow black people to come inside. Schools throughout the South and elsewhere were segregated as well. In Virginia, it was illegal for black students and white students to go to school together. There were two high schools in Farmville. Barbara's school, the all-black Moton High School, was in disrepair. The toilets were old and cracked. The classroom ceilings were so leaky that students sat at their desks with umbrellas. The schools used wood-burning stoves in the winter, and students got sick from breathing in the smoke from the stoves. The school was also very crowded. Moton High had been designed for 180 students, but there were 450 students. Some classes were held in a broken-down bus in the parking lot. On the other side of town, white kids attended Farmville High, which had a real cafeteria, a fancy auditorium, large classrooms, locker rooms, and modern heating. When Moton parents and teachers complained to the school board, they were told a new school would be built soon, but most of the money was going to the white students. The only things going to Moton were Farmville's old textbooks. What could Barbara do? Barbara was upset about the terrible conditions at her school. She loved learning and she loved her teachers. She wanted to have the school that she and her classmates deserved. But in the 1950s, challenging whites was dangerous. Black people were treated very poorly. In the South, there were lynchings, in which a large group of white people would kill a black person for something they didn't do. Because judges, juries, and police officers were all white, the white people did not get punished for killing black people. Yet Barbara was not afraid. She believed that it was up to her to do something. But what? A bold plan. Barbara had an idea to start a strike. If she and her classmates refused to go to school, the school board would have to do something. She wanted to protest the bad conditions at her school. On the day of the strike, a student distracted the principal. When the principal left, students delivered notes to each classroom telling students to come to the auditorium. When the students were all there, Barbara began to speak. She talked about the inferior conditions of their school. She talked about the fact that the school board did not give them any money. She talked about how hard it was to learn in this environment. Are we just going to accept these conditions, she asked, or are we going to do something about it? By the time her powerful speech was over, many students were on Barbara's side. The entire school body walked out in peaceful protest. The fight was just beginning. The local newspaper made fun of the students, saying that they were looking for an excuse to skip classes and play. The superintendent threatened to fire teachers and the principal for not controlling their students. The strike, it appeared, was a failure. Yet the students were strong and refused to attend class until they were given a new school. Barbara asked some lawyers for help. The lawyers said they would support the students if they were willing to demand integration. That is, black students and white students attending school together, and if their parents were behind them. To Barbara, demanding integration seemed like reaching for the moon. Barbara gave another rousing speech at a town hall meeting attended by almost the entire black community of Farmville. The crowd erupted in joyous singing and teary eyes. After much discussion and more speeches, the entire community agreed to get behind a lawsuit demanding integration. But the fight was just beginning. After the lawsuit was filed, Barbara received a death threat. Fearing for Barbara's safety, her parents sent her to live with her uncle in Alabama. She finished high school far from her friends. A landmark decision. The lawsuit went all the way to the United States Supreme Court, where the case was named Brown versus the Board of Education. In 1954, the Supreme Court decided Brown versus the Board of Education, declaring segregated schools illegal. Barbara was by then a student at Spelman College in Georgia. She was so excited by the decision that she shouted with happiness. An act of courage. Barbara's act of courage helped the civil rights movement. In Montgomery, Alabama, in 1955, Rosa Parks captured the nation's attention when she refused to move to the back of the bus. The bus boycott that followed led the desegregation of city buses. Martin Luther King Jr. agreed with nonviolent protests like Barbara's as the best way to make sure Black and white people had equal rights. Today in Richmond, Virginia, there is a statue honoring the courage of Barbara and the Morton students. Engraved on the statue are Barbara's words, "It seemed like reaching for the moon."